Welcome. This is the Colorado Real Estate Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the first-time home buyer experience. Brandon and I are both real estate agents in Colorado Springs. We've both worked with first-time home buyers, and we're going to just walk through the process of what it's like. So we're going to just have a conversation about this. So Brandon, tell me a little bit about yourself. How long you've been a realtor?
Sure. So 3 years, going into my fourth year right now. Worked probably 50% of my transactions have been with first-time home buyers. And so a lot of young families, a lot of individuals starting out maybe from making their first investment to trying to buy their next 10-year home to start a family in. Moved to Colorado in 2015. And so I've been able to watch a lot of the change happen, specifically in our home market here, as it changed going into COVID and coming out of COVID. And now we're trying to find our new what's next in our settling.
Right.
And so, yeah, but it's something that I love to do. I love working with buyers. I love working with first-time home buyers. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I think there's a lot of value to be had.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I got into real estate is to help people with their biggest investment. And that's really going to be, for 99% of Americans, that's going to be there. And that's where they're going to gain the most equity and most value.
Oh, for sure.
And so I really think it's an important part of the process. And I want to, and I think there's too much barrier. There's too much knowledge barrier for a lot of people to getting into the first house. I think it's just, it's tough. I mean, and it's daunting. I mean, you're spending here in Colorado Springs, if you're going to buy something, it's, between $300,000 to $500,000 for the first home. Easy.
For the average person, you see a $500,000 check going out. That's daunting.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying because it always hasn't always been that way. In the past 10 years, prices have gone up quite a bit in Colorado, especially in Colorado Springs. One of the reasons I moved here in 2014, and one of the reasons I did was because it was so affordable.
Sure.
In the Front Range, Colorado Springs kind of stuck out as an affordable area, and it still is, which kind of tells you what the rest of the range is doing.
Yeah.
So, I think this is really important. And so when you look at a first-time home buyer, what is like the first thing you're going to want to talk to them about? And when they come to you and they say, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a house in Colorado Springs," what are you looking for, and what do you want to teach them?
For sure. There's two components. The first is this is their first home. And so I do try to see the personal aspect of what they're looking for, when they're telling me their dreams, what they hope to find. And so I do want to hear and take that information in and have a conversation with them about what their hopes are. But there's the obvious obstacle of finances. And when it's your first time buying a home, you have no idea what it takes. What's even the first document that I'll sign as I'm working my way towards purchasing this home. And so out of the gate, one of our very, very first conversations is we need to get you connected to a lender so that we can have a conversation about affordability. And that's, in my mind, the gateway to where we can start looking and the conversations we can start having. But first, we got to figure out where's your money at? What's your affordability? What would it even look like for you to start making payments on a home for the next 30 years?
Yeah. Now, when they come to you and they say, "Well, should I rent? Should I buy? I don't know what to do." I've kind of pushed into this process. They don't understand. How do you compare the two, renting and buying?
Sure. Buying is not for everyone. Not everyone's in the right season. That doesn't mean that they can't work towards it. And that's something we work with a lot, especially partnering with our lenders to figure out how do we get them there. But it's not everybody's right time to buy. And so for some people, renting is the option that they might have to take until they can, either from credit repair to debt scenarios to job raises. And so, with renting, if that's where they're at, that's where they're at. But we want to at least start a game plan of we want to stop giving money away.
Yeah.
We want to stop giving maybe 25% of your income just away that you'll never see again. And at least make a plan to get you to purchase where we can start recouping some of that investment instead of just giving it to your landlord.
Yeah, I agree. And so when I see like a first-time home buyer or somebody who's talking to me about buying a home, I'm looking for somebody who's beginning to stabilize out. So they're out of school, they have a steady job, and so then those steps, that's kind of like the initial phase. Sure. And then we talk about once they're there, then I'm good with let's move forward with let's talk about the credit. And I like to get mine. I've had people come talk to me, and I kick them over to a lender right away.
Yeah,
even if it's a year away.
Yep, I think that might be the decision maker for them. It's the very first conversation they have with the lender based on their debt, based on their credit, their income. They may go, "Oh, I can only afford $1,500 a month," and there's not a home in Colorado Springs that I can buy for $1,500 a month. And so that may initiate a totally different conversation of where do we get, what do I need to be able to afford to get the home that I want, and what's my game plan to get there?
Yeah. There's a lot of steps in that process, and they might find out that they need less than they think.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of programs out there, FHA, VA, that they can come in. And the first time home buyer I just put in, it just closed yesterday, they walked away and they didn't put any money down. It was 100% finance. It was great. It was VA buyer guy, got out of the military, really on top of things. Mm-hmm. And he got here and he said, you know what? I looked at renting, and it is daunting. Like this, what I could find and have a home for my family that in a decent area and for a good price compared to what I could get into for buying a home is just not the same thing. Yeah. And especially good school districts and stuff like that. It's hard to find a good rental, and it's sometimes a lot easier. And
absolutely
for the long term, we're looking, 10 years down the road, that family is really set up now.
Absolutely. I think when we're talking about balancing the dream, what do my parents have that I would hope to have someday,
right,
which is where a lot of these first-time home buyers are in the finances. That's also one of the first obstacles we have to overcome is what's realistic, but what's worth it.
Right.
Because you can continue to put, sure, the house you may want is costing, it's going to cost you $3,500 to $4,000 a month. But that may not be the right time for you to buy that home.
Right.
Let's look at something we can get you in now that you can begin to build your equity in. It may be a townhouse. It may be something that's, just more affordable, but that's got to be part of our conversation before we're rolling this obstacle uphill.
Right.
Of trying to go
tempering the expectations of the buyer. Say, okay,
do you want to make a good financial decision or do you want your dream home?
We don't want you.
One I can help you with today. The other I may not be able to.
Now, if they have like the possibility of a near-term increase in income,
sure,
stuff like that, we can talk about that kind of thing. But really,
all part of the game plan.
Yeah, it's part of the game plan. We really need to look at the whole picture of what they're looking at.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of the process. So I found educating the first-time home buyer is really, really important. No matter you ask them, okay, do you know what we're doing here? You got to just walk them through the steps. So let's walk a new home. So I'm a new home buyer.
Yep. Day one.
And let's. So I come to you and I say, okay, I want to put an offer on this place. Mm-hmm. All right. And I've gone and I've got my financing set up. I'm ready to go there. But I'm ready to put an offer on this place. All right. What do I do?
Okay. So you've already got your financing from the lender. You've got your number.
Yeah.
And now we've targeted a home, because that would be part of my job typically, is making sure we've identified a home that actually fits in your target range. So assuming we found the right home, it fits in that target range, what's the first step? Am I same page? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the first thing we would walk through is we've seen the home, we know we want it, it fits all of our budget items, it fits all of our wants and needs that were our non-negotiables of what we're wanting to get into. We're going to write up an offer. So I'm going to sit down with them. We're going to bring out the standard contract forms for Colorado, which is part of the mystery. Right. How do I write a form? Well, the government helps protect buyers in our state.
Well, hold on. Didn't you have me sign something? Didn't I already sign a contract?
Right, exactly, right. So we're going back to showing homes, and that's relatively new in our industry right now, is agents are required in most markets to get some kind of contract signed between the agent and the buyer. And so that would have happened before we're writing offers. As we were starting to, here's the range of homes we'd like to see. We'd like to start getting in and seeing and showing some of these homes.
So what does that contract mean? Sure. It's a big piece of paper, and I just signed it.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, and it's smaller than the rest of the contracts that we'll sign, and they're all still intimidating. And so that buyer agency agreement is what we call it. You hear it called a buyer contract or all different kinds of things, but the buyer agency agreement is literally the agreement between the buyer and the agent to go and purchase a home, and for the agent to get paid whatever the negotiated contract fee is for that agent to get. And so it says, we're going to show this home, or we're going to show you homes for X amount of time. And if I'm able to help you procure the home that you desire and go under contract in that stated amount of time, then I will receive X amount of fee or commission for my services. And so that's our agreement to work together to go and find homes, because it may take 3 days or it may take 3 years.
Yeah. So it sets up a fiduciary responsibility for the agent.
Correct.
So, and what fiduciary responsibility is the agent has to put the home buyer's interest first.
Right. Which is the second side of the contract.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So the first side is establishing the basic terms of our partnership and agreement.
It's almost like I consider it an employment agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it also protects the buyer.
Yeah.
And so it states very specifically the services that I am to provide, the information that I'm not to share, how it is that I'm to handle your financial and personal information. So there's a lot of protection for the buyer in that as well, which is why it's important, I think, from the get-go, especially with all the changes in our market, where once that wasn't required to go see homes, and now in most markets it is. Really important that we sit down and actually go through that document and have a really solid understanding of what you're protected in, what I'm protected in, what our commitments are to each other.
What if I don't? What if I get bothered by you and I just say I don't like this anymore?
Sure.
Can I just eliminate that
I
contract?
think it's why it really matters on the agent that you pick.
Yeah.
Because some agents could make that really difficult.
Yeah.
Realistically, we terminate the agreement and we move on.
Yeah.
It's only, it's really only as binding as we're. Let me let me say that carefully. It is a legal document. Mm-hmm. There is a contract that is enforceable in there. Personally, I want to work with somebody that I want to work with, and if we're just not gelling, we're going to terminate that contract and move on, as long as it's mutually agreeable.
Okay.
But it does protect each party from me being able to just run away and not fulfill my obligation to you as your agent.
Yeah.
But it also keeps you from working me for 3 years and driving all over the city to see all these different homes, and then you just going and signing with a new agent and moving.
Yeah.
And so it's reasonable. If we can sit down and have a reasonable conversation about the agreement, it's to, within reason, protect each other. I've never had a buyer agency agreement come into question. It's been explained really well.
Yeah.
We're on the same page before we ever sign and get started. And it's usually very easy to see that it's there to protect both parties.
Yeah. Okay.
But when an agent comes in and doesn't explain those things, and it seems like this mystery document that's like, well, just sign it because I can't show you anything if you don't sign it. Total wrong approach.
Yeah. I've noticed when I work with, I like to take a lot more time and really walk through. Like I like to give them the document, let them read it, and we'll talk about it because, I mean, it's a legal document.
It is.
We're very well educated in these documents, but when somebody just reads it for the first time, it's, oh, come on.
Mm-hmm.
You really expect me to just tell me what this says?
And a step further, I would encourage anyone who has the desire and with the desire, the means to go hire a legal attorney.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
have them review any document that they're signing.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing to hide. I'm not trying to sneak anything in there. And so the documents are standard. They're that way for a reason, to protect the buyer and the all parties of the transaction. And so I would highly encourage anybody that's beginning to go through a home purchasing
Like we talked
opportunity.
about, this is almost $500,000.
Exactly.
You want to protect yourself. So and our role as agents is to help protect these buyers and absolutely, not if, we highly recommend that they seek counsel.
Right. Yep. Yeah. What's going to cost you? We'll have this conversation throughout the journey of the home buying, but what might cost you $500 right now could cost you $50,000 next year. And so that's part of the maturity of understanding that we're talking about in the very beginning, of making sure you're buying a home. You're buying, potentially a $250,000 to $500,000 investment or more.
And we don't just say this. I mean, this is something that I think
we practice.
Really practice. We really want people to, because I want to protect people. I want to help them, guide them through the process and protect them. So I think it's not just, we really mean go see a lawyer, go see counsel.
100%. We're not intimidated by that. We do the same thing when we come into obstacles that we don't understand. We would encourage anyone to do that. If you have an agent that discourages you from talking to an attorney, I would run.
Yeah.
I would tuck tail and run as far and fast away as you can. Yeah.
All right. So now we've got that taken care of. Okay. So now I'm ready to put this offer on this place.
Okay. Buyer agency agreement. So if we do backtrack a little bit, because that's more typical in our partnership, we've connected, we've talked about expectations, we've brought this buyer agency agreement, we know the terms, we know our partnership. Now it's time to go find the other party. And so we're going to find the person that's going to sell us the home to fulfill our agreement. And so we're going to go start seeing homes. We've already set up our search. We know exactly how many bedrooms and bathrooms and your non-negotiables that you're looking for. And we find the home. It checks enough boxes for us to go, this is our investment, this is our home, this is what we want to pursue. We're going to take whatever terms that the seller's offered. We're going to take whatever our desired offer would be, and we're going to start the negotiation process of writing an offer and sending that to the seller. And so lots of different things involved in here, and it's usually a better part of 24 hours, if not a couple of days, conversation on exactly what it is that's going to be in that document, because there are negotiations that are necessary and every contract looks a little different.
So what do we talk about negotiations? The price?
We're talking about the price. Yeah. We're talking about what's included in the property of the home. Things like washers, dryers, certain appliances. We're talking about the condition of the home. We're talking about the walls and chipped paint on the exterior, the roof. We're talking about foundation. We're talking about, how old certain things are and when they might need to be replaced. We're talking about commissions that are going to get paid. We're talking about closing fees. Already, I'm sure the list is becoming overwhelming to somebody who hasn't done this before.
There's a lot in that
How
contract.
do I keep track of all of these things?
The contract to buy and sell is very long. And
it is.
And like when we're going to close, how that's going to work.
Right.
How long do we have in our inspections?
Correct.
How much are we going to put down for earnest money?
Mm-hmm.
All these things.
What type of loan are we going to use?
Right.
Yeah.
What type of loan are they willing to accept?
Exactly.
And that's all within that's a negotiation. So it's not just price. There's so many different things.
Right.
And I found my experience that the price is where a lot of people will focus. But and that's how you can really benefit from a negotiator is you can say, okay, this is the price now, but then I want these other things. And so you can really get a better deal for your buyer.
Yeah. And there is an art and a science to it. There's certain things we know that we're going to ask for every time. Because it helps protect our buyer. There's certain things that we're going to ask for depending on the situation and that we're going to go fight for the buyer. Depending on the condition of the home. And again, I feel like we're kind of tooting our own horn here, but that's why it's so important. It's why we do what we do. It's why we care for the buyer.
Well, yeah.
Because how do you know what to ask for?
Right.
How much is too much? We've seen deals blow up because people ask for too much or they don't ask for enough.
I've seen deals fall apart for just the smallest amount of money.
Yeah. And so to have a professional that kind of knows the boundaries, like how far can we go before we've gone too far? What's a reasonable thing to ask for compared to whatever the obstacle is that we're trying to overcome. Huge part of the buying process.
So let's say I put an offer in, we've submitted the offer, and then so an offer is going to be a contract to buy and sell.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, let's say they want $500,000. Let's just say $500,000. Sure. They list it for $500,000, but I don't want to pay full price because I don't pay full price for anything.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm going to offer $475,000.
Yeah.
And then, so what does that look like on when we submit that to them, and how does that whole process play out?
Sure. So part of this, I would say, even before we get to that step, we go back to the expectations conversation a little bit of what are we really hoping to get out of this based on our finances, based on our dreams and our goals. And I always tell my buyers, we're going to make the right offer for us. And if it's not the right offer for us, we're going to walk away. Because we can get so tied up in wanting that thing so bad that we start making bad decisions about the home.
I've done it myself.
We're all guilty of that. We get the purchase lust. And we're like, but we're so close and we got to have it. And this is the one.
The wife wants it. We got to get it.
And it may not be the one.
Yeah.
And in my experience, there is another one out there. And so if we're not able to get this under the terms that really suit our buyer, I usually strongly encourage for them to walk away.
Yeah.
And so that expectation is going to be really, really important in the negotiation process because we could always be just another 5,000 away, just another 10,000 away, just another. And all of a sudden we look up and our payments are out of the range of what we wanted, our purchase price, our terms. We're giving way too much out for us to accomplish our financial and personal goals. And so, as we've written that offer, we've sent that in. Part of the expectation conversation is we're ready to walk away if this doesn't work for us.
Yep.
And so if I'm working with somebody that I know is like, I'm not, I know they're asking 500, I'm not going to pay that. Then I'm going to go, we're going to make the best offer that we can make, but we're going to be ready to walk away if they don't agree. Now, this is where the other part of the professionalism comes in beyond the expectations, because there are homes that there's an asking price of 500 that are worth 500.
Yep.
And you don't have to pay 500 to purchase that home, but they don't have to sell it for less than 5. And so that's some of evaluating the market and me bringing a certain level of confidence to my buyers to say, hey, this home is overpriced. Here's all the comparisons in the market that show that we should be able to get this home for less. There's also go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say the price, but I like to say the price is not based on the comparisons. The comparisons give us a guide.
Correct.
The price is what you're willing to pay for it.
Exactly. Yep. And so if you're not willing to pay 500, but the home is worth 500, we can't make them sell it to us for 500.
Right.
So we make our offer and we're willing to walk away if they don't give us what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so again, that's why every home is a little bit different. That's why every offer is a little bit different. That's why every buyer and seller are a little bit different. And the art is bringing all these things together and making it work.
All right, let's talk
Now,
nuts and bolts.
Yeah, assuming that we've sent the offer.
So we wrote up the offer. The buyer signs the offer. We submit the offer.
Yep.
What does that mean? Like, and then what am I waiting for? Does this happen right away?
Sure. Yeah, we've given them all of our terms. Typically, we ask for about 24 hours. That's the average time of acceptance. So we sent in all of our terms. We're all on the right page there. We sent that over to the seller, and we've given them roughly 24 hours for them to respond. Now, in that time, they can respond in 2 hours. But if they pass the 24-hour mark, we're technically out of contract, and we need to submit a new offer or write an amendment to our previous offer to try to give them a larger window to accept that. And so there is a essence of timeliness that has to come into play on these contracts. But sometimes, again, that's why it can vary. Sometimes we may want to put in a 12-hour acceptance. Sometimes we may want a 72-hour acceptance, depending on the property and what the seller's going through. That would make our offer more appealing. But on average, we're looking at a 24-hour acceptance where the seller's going to either accept our offer, counter, or reject.
Okay. Somewhere
in that 24-hour window. Our dream is they just accept it.
Right.
They sign our contract and they go, here you go.
Have you ever seen that happen?
I have, with the right offer.
Okay.
But it is increasingly less common. Yeah. And so buyers and sellers in this current market are more divided than they have been in the past few years. And we can speak to that later. But in our process right now of purchasing this home, it's very likely that the seller will come back and they will counter at least one of the terms, if not multiple.
And there's a lot of terms. I mean,
there's a lot of terms.
I mean, it could be countering the closing date or countering
closing costs, the purchase price, of course, the commission fees can be countered and negotiated all the way, through this process. Inspection dates moved up or moved back. That's typically what I see in the counter is just some of the dates moved around based on the preferences of the seller and the agent.
Yeah, because if the seller needs to use the house that day and they can't have an inspector, or they're going to be out of town, that's not going to work. So,
right.
Yeah, that's okay. So let's say they counter.
Yep.
And then
now the ball's back in our court.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit like a tennis match. We've served it over to them, and they've got to try to return it back to us, so they can let it go and we can move on. But if they return that back, the ball's now with us, and we get to decide whether we're going to accept, counter, or reject their counter. Mm-hmm. And this can go on for many days,
many times.
Depending on how close we are. The closer we are, but sometimes buyers and sellers can just dig their heels in. And we can go back and forth trying to find where everyone feels like they win, which honestly is our goal.
It's a win-win. I mean,
we want everyone to walk away from the table feeling like they've got what they needed.
Yeah, I know. As a buyer's agent, I don't want to go in and feel like my seller was ripped off.
Right.
But I represent the buyer.
Correct.
So, and as a seller, I would do the same thing.
Right.
I represent the seller. I'm going to try to get the best deal for the seller. Now, that doesn't mean I'm trying to rip off the buyer or vice versa. But I'm trying to find the best deal,
right.
and get to a meeting of minds and
absolutely
make both parties happy, which I think is difficult.
It's why one of those initial coffees before we start this process is so important.
Yeah,
we have to sit down and talk expectations again, especially again with first time home buyers, or I would even say first time home sellers.
Yeah,
if this is the first time you're going through this process, it's a negotiation.
And as a first time home seller, that's a whole nother conversation because you have to rechange because. Buying, look, see, buy.
Mm-hmm.
Selling, you're waiting a long time.
Totally different.
You could wait, right now we're 45 days on the market.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe multiple series just on selling.
Just on the sell. Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
So having that expectation out there where I would love for a 10 out of 10 home run, dream everything on your bucket list for exactly the price that you want, but that's not really a market purchase.
Yeah, that does.
Let's have a dream. That's wonderful. But we're going to have to compromise somewhere along the way. Mm-hmm. And so let's have that expectation. Either side cannot get everything that they want because then neither side will get anything.
Yeah.
There's going to be compromise. We'll find where that is. That's part of the art and the skill of negotiation. Yeah. We'll find the thing that makes it work for everybody. If everyone will keep calm, give it some time, but we have to be reasonable.
Yeah.
There's no reason the seller should give us everything that we want and them not get anything that they want.
All right, so we get a deal. Let's say we put an offer.
Yep.
They counter. We accept.
We're under contract.
Okay. Let's talk about what that means. What does that mean?
For sure. And so under contract now, this is Really, really important. And I feel like I'm going to say expectations 1,000 times during this contract or during this podcast, but it's really, really important that they understand the legality of the contract. We're now not just trying to buy a home; we are buying a home. When the seller and the buyer have both agreed on the terms and we have both signed the contract, we are legally and financially responsible to do everything that we can in good interest to try to purchase this home. Now, we're not required to purchase it at this point, and there's some off ramps that we'll talk about as we keep moving through this process. But we have now started the clock from going under contract to close.
So, what are a couple of the first things that I should expect as a buyer? Not from your perspective as an agent, but let's say just from my perspective, what do I need to do?
Sure. Yep. You're going to get a phone call from me. You're going to say, we're under contract, and you're going to want to keep your phone on you 24/7 because it's got to be things that come up. I always tell my buyers that, like, if you're in the busiest season of life, maybe not the best time to buy a home. If it is busy, get ready for it to get extra busy because we're going to have some conversations. I'm going to be sending you emails and documents. We're going to be scheduling appointments. And so be ready and flexible to have some late nights and get these things done. But we go under contract. The first thing you're expecting as a buyer is within the next 24 hours, I'm trying to get our inspection scheduled. This is one of the most important steps of any home purchase because a home can look really, really nice on the outside and on the inside be literally falling apart. And the seller may not even know it. It's not like there's this malicious scheme. They've been in the home 20 years. Yeah. They don't know what's happening in the pipes under the house. They don't know what's happening in the sewer system out in the front yard. They don't know. And so they've given us something that they think is wonderful. We're attempting to buy something that we think is wonderful, but we need to make sure that it's actually wonderful. And so we work with several different really, really talented inspectors. They come in with, toothpick and magnifying glass, and they go through everything that they can possibly find to try to open and look and test. And they test all the electrical. They test every appliance in the home. They run water through the whole house and look for different moisture spots or hot spots in the wall from different electrical problems. They're going to go into the attic and they're going to look at the insulation. They're going to look at the beams supporting the roof. They're going to inspect the roof and they're going to make sure that there's no major leaks or damage. And they're going to give us this pretty extensive, exhaustive list.
Now, do I need to be there for this inspection?
Ideally, you don't have to be. You don't have to have an inspection legally, but I would really question working with a buyer that doesn't want to do an inspection. Yeah, there's very few cases where I would feel comfortable doing.
What if the home is sold as is?
Whole nother conversation, whole nother realm of expectations.
But I still have an inspection.
I would 100% do the. So
yeah.
Sold as is saying the seller's giving the home with, they're agreeing at the very beginning, we're changing nothing. Do what you want to do, investigate what you want to investigate. The seller, we are giving nothing. The home is the home, we're changing nothing. And so the buyer in an as-is case has to walk in with that understanding of whatever I investigate, whatever money I spend is money I spend, and it's just for my own knowledge. But back to a more typical case for a buyer, we're going to do this inspection within the first 7 days, ideally, of going under contract on this home. And you're going to be there as the buyer because you're going to want to ask questions and know and see and where's the main water shut off and where's the gas shut off if there is one on the home and you're going to want to know all these things and be able to ask questions about your home. Again, probably a whole nother podcast of the inspection process and what someone needs to know. Good. Okay, great. But we're going to go build this big list of things, and then we're going to make a list of stuff that the seller may or may not have been aware of, but that we want fixed.
What about that earnest money thing? Was I supposed to put any money down? How is that going?
Sure. Yeah. So alongside the inspection getting scheduled.
Right away.
Like first 24 hours
thing on the list.
Inspection. And that doesn't mean the inspection will happen in the first 24 hours, but that's one of our first conversations we're having is, when are you available in the next 7 days for us to get this inspection done so we can get this? Alongside that is earnest money, which you just mentioned, which is already agreed upon amount in the purchase contract. The buyer and the seller agreed on this amount, and it's our good faith commitment that we're going to purchase this home. We're not just wasting everybody's time.
Is this a fee or?
It is a payment towards, best case scenario as a buyer, it's a payment towards your total closing costs. You're making a little down payment. On a $500,000 home, it would average be around $5,000. It's typically 1% of the purchase price.
And how do I give that money to you? How does that work?
No, I will not receive it. I am not the guy that wants to be responsible for that. That's a whole nother can of worms. So in this process, the seller has selected a title company for us to work with.
What does that mean?
The title company is going to work on getting us to close. And so they're going to handle the background research of the property. Are there any liens on the property? Is there anyone else that has claim to the property other than the seller? It's to present a clean and clear title. Another great podcast to have in the future, I'm sure, to have a title rep on here. But they're the ones that are essentially facilitating the close as the party between the buyer and their agent and the seller and their agent. And so we're working through the title company to facilitate a move towards close. Anything to do with finances will go through the title company.
Okay.
We're not outside of third-party transactions like the inspection, actually, which I'll clarify in a second. But the money going towards the purchase of the home, the money being given to the seller from the purchase of the home, the money going to the agents out of commission from the home, tax payments, those things are going to go through title company.
Okay.
And so where were we in that?
They just so
earnest money, yeah. So we'll write that, $3,000 to $5,000 check or more, whatever we've agreed upon for earnest money within 3 days is the typical acceptance period, where we have 3 days from going under contract to get that check in, and it can be a personal check. They make it pretty easy on the front end. It can be a personal check that we write out and we get to title, and they hold that money.
Okay.
It doesn't go into anyone's bank account or get deposited into either the buyer or the seller until the close is facilitated.
So it's held in what kind of account is it?
It'd be like an escrow account.
What does escrow mean?
So escrow in our home buying case is a fund opened typically through title in the beginning that holds different fees. It'll hold our earnest money temporarily until it's applied, but it'll also hold prepaid taxes and other financial investments that we're making on the house that'll get paid back out through title.
Held for the benefit of others.
Correct. Yeah, for the benefit of others. So there will be a certain amount in your escrow account left over after closing that they will use to pay then on other payments that you're going to be making throughout the year.
Okay. So we've got our earnest money down. We've taken that down to title. We've met title.
Yep.
We've scheduled our inspection. Scheduled our inspection. Okay. So now why does it take 30 days? And we have about 30 days now. Now what happens?
Well, you'll find out when you get into it. You'll be wishing you had 45 or 50 days.
Right. Even then, sometimes.
Because in those 30 days, we have our inspection. We're going to have negotiations over the inspection. We're also going to have one of the next. Trying to keep this organized because, again, it's a long conversation.
We have our checklist here. So we have a checklist that walks us through this process because I think there's 100 and something things that we ended up doing.
There's a lot of things. Right. And
so it's sometimes to get them in order and to do them correctly, we kind of walk through. We walk through a checklist.
Right.
So So
we've got the inspection scheduled with the buyer. We've got so many good things in here.
Yeah.
So earnest money's in. That's the first 3 days. Inspection scheduled. That's the first 3 days. Our lender has now also requested an appraisal. And so that's going to be one of the next big things that needs to happen. Usually in the first 14 to 15 days is ideal, depending on the market. Sometimes that's longer, sometimes that's shorter on how busy the appraisers are. Our goal then is for them to say that the home is actually worth what we're paying, because the lender's not going to want to give us money. If the home's only worth $400 and we're paying $500, they're not going to do that. They're not going to give us $500,000 for a $400,000 home. And so these are little areas that I communicate to our buyer, our off ramps. If we get through the inspection and the inspection's not up to what we want it to be and the seller's not willing to fix that, we can get out of the contract and get our earnest money back.
Okay.
Same with the appraisal. If the appraisal comes back and we're not able to come to terms between the lender, the seller, and the buyer on what we can pay and what they're willing to sell it for based on the appraisal.
Hold on a second. Who paid for the inspection? Did I pay for the inspection?
We paid for the inspection. And that was a third party.
The buyer.
The buyer.
The buyer paid.
The third party agreement in this is we're hiring a third party contractor, the inspector, to come in and do the service for us. They're not a part of the contract. They're not a part of the transaction.
Okay.
We are hiring them to come perform
We
service for
meaning
us.
the buyer.
The buyer.
The
correct.
buyer is on.
Representing the buyer side. Now I may schedule it. I may, communicate and recommend, but the buyer is hiring this person to come perform a service for them. And unless communicated otherwise, the buyer is the one responsible for paying for the inspection.
Okay. Same for the appraisal.
Same for the appraisal. The appraisal can be worked. Sometimes I've seen, again, it's a wild world out there of negotiations, and I've seen appraisals paid for from other parties. Sometimes
But
generally speaking, you're also responsible for paying that. That may be paid up front, or it may be rolled into your closing costs.
Oftentimes in a closing cost. It's
Correct.
easiest.
Yep. And so in your upfront costs, things to be expecting that we'd have talked about way before we even went under contract is the money that you're going to be paying for earnest on average, based on what we're searching for.
Yeah, because that's really what I want to know as a buyer is
Right.
actually, how do I?
How much money's coming out before I even get to buy the home?
Yeah.
Because the lender's going to take care of the big check. And then we'll start making our payments. The mortgage that we're also excited about to get a home. But on the front end, we're paying only the inspection, we're paying for the appraisal, and then there may be some things that pop up in between that we may be responsible for, but it's very, very unlikely. Okay. That could be a foundation inspection or other things that may pop up that
A sewer inspection.
go deeper than what the inspection covered. If our inspector uncovers some different things that go beyond his realm of expertise, we may still want to go back in and hire another third-party contractor.
Roughly how much do you think that costs?
It depends on the square footage of the home and the scope of the work. So
like for a general home inspection.
Yeah, $400 to $500 is what I would recommend.
Plus or minus.
Having set
It
aside.
depends on the size, but yeah.
Depending on the size. So the larger the square footage. So the average $500,000 home, depending on the range of inspection products that you end up buying, sewer scope, radon inspection, there's some other things that you can get into that are considered kind of additional to a base inspection. That could range anywhere from $400 to $600.
Okay, so we're talking earnest money, which is about 1% of them.
Right.
Which is going to be used to apply for the house.
Correct.
We're talking inspections.
Yep.
Which is going to be $400 to $500 for about a $500,000 home.
Yep.
And it could be more.
Could be more.
It could be less. It could be more, depending on any other additional. And then this appraisal, how much is that going to cost us?
So the appraisal, again, typically I don't see that check very often because it's typically paid through.
I just saw one yesterday. So
yeah, what was your experience
it was
recently?
That was
I was gonna say sub 1,000.
Yeah, it's sub 1,000
because I've seen some a little higher in a rare situation, but I would anticipate.
I'd expect 8 to 1,000.
I plan for more, and so I would typically say plan for 1,000. And it's always better for them to be surprised of like, oh, it was only $750.
So when I walk it and before I put an offer on a house and before I even have my down payment for the loan ready to go,
correct,
I need to have $800,000 to $1,000, $800 to $1,000 for appraisal.
Right.
I need to have $300 to $500 for inspections.
Yep.
And I need to have earnest money, which is going to be 1%. So that'd be $5,000 on a $500,000 home.
Correct. And I would say minimum.
So
and that's to cut it. That's to cut it close.
Minimum. That's
right.
minimum. That's before I even put any money down on the home, which generally is going to. Okay. So
we're looking at roughly. I would say the minimum. The ideal would be to have about 2% of the purchase price of the home set aside. So you're able to put 1% in on the purchase of the home. So there's $5,000 going in on your earnest money, or $3,500 for $350 or $350,000 home, plus another 1%.
Now, is the earnest money separate, like than the down payment, or is that included?
The earnest money is separate from what the lender will want to see as a down payment. The earnest money will be applied to your total at the end. It's kind of splitting hairs based on how you see that applied. It's all one balance at the end that's been paid down.
It can be. It doesn't.
Correct. It's possible to get your earnest money back.
Yeah.
Depending on how you write up the contract and you negotiate it. Either way, all that money is going to end up going where it's going.
Yeah, it's going towards.
So typically, when it's paid at closing, you're splitting hairs on whether it's the $3,500 from the earnest money or the $3,500 from your down payment. That's wrapped up in the $20,000 of your down payment to the $0 of your down payment, depending on the kind of loan you go with. If you're looking at conventional as opposed to VA.
Yeah, that's a conversation with a lender, which
we'll have.
So
necessary.
So then we're going to go through the lender and we're going to get everything lined. So that's going to be really on the buyer, because the agent's going to, if you've connected with a lender, they're going to communicate with the lender, but the buyer's really going to have to talk. So that's going to really be on the buyers.
Right. Yeah. Once we get through the inspection, that's one of the main shifts in our relationship. And so I still represent you financially, but we're not hanging out as often. We're going to spend a lot of time together, showing homes, researching, writing offers, reviewing offers, countering, negotiating. I'm at every inspection that's at all possible for me to be at, because it's important for me to know what's going on in the home so I can help continue to negotiate. After that point, those kinds of big decisions begin to focus more on what the lender is seeing and their approval of the purchase price of the home and how comfortable the buyer is with that rate. And so there might be some things that pop up where we're again now writing new amendments and new contracts and shifting dates around, and that's where I step back.
What is
in.
an amendment?
The amendment, fun. They are one of the most useful tools that we have.
Yeah, it is.
Contracts again can really at any point be changed as long as both parties are in mutual agreement that the contract should be changed. And so let's say we've been talking about inspections a lot. We said we've got 14 days to get an inspection done. If we don't get an inspection done in 14 days and submit our findings to the seller, we've waived the right essentially to have an inspection. Our inspector calls us 12 days in. We have 2 days left, and he goes, got to cancel. I got the flu. I can't show up. We can't get any of the inspector to show up in the next 2 days. I'm able to write an amendment and ask for the seller to give us an extension on our time on that particular date. Now, that's a date example of an amendment. The seller would have to agree. They would have to sign. If the buyer has signed and the seller has signed, we have now contractually moved that date to a later time to better benefit both parties. An amendment, the most basic way to look at it is it's a change in the contract that serves the purpose of keeping the contract alive in a way that's mutually beneficial for both parties.
Okay, great. So it could be as simple as changing, like I just did an amendment to change name.
Yep.
Sometimes the lender will use the middle name. Yep. Sometimes we'll use not the middle
There's
name.
LLCs involved sometimes.
Yeah,
that
sometimes
need to be
that. So there's lots of amendments.
Amendment is anything altering the contract, and it must be agreed upon in both parties.
Very likely you're going to see amendments.
Multiple.
Maybe, more than two. Two is fairly common.
Two is common. Yeah. If you got 10 to 15, it's probably a rare investment type thing. Like I wouldn't be expecting that. I would also have a lot of questions for your agent if there continues to be things that they're having to change.
Two is probably 2 to 3.
2 to 3, I think is
pretty normal.
Very
normal. It has nothing to do with like the agent not being prepared.
No.
It has more to do with like
things change.
Okay. So we're through. We've got our lender. We're going through. No, what is this thing the lender keep telling me about underwriting? What does that mean? I don't understand.
Sure. Underwriting is the guarantor essentially for the lending company. And so you've got the loan officer that is who you've been talking to. They're the ones that have been giving you the quotes and running the numbers and trying to come up with things. But for them to give you an idea of what you can purchase, the process from that idea becoming a promise of payment is underwriting. And so underwriting is going to ask for your W-2s. They're going to ask for tax statements. They're going to ask for any other kind of additional income, 1099s, employment verification. They're going to make sure, debt. They're going to be evaluating your debt to income ratio and making sure that there's not some hidden, brand new Ford Raptor that you purchased that you didn't tell your loan officer about.
This isn't 2006.
Right. Yeah.
You're gonna have to prove. You're gonna have to have a lot of documents.
You're gonna have to have a lot of documents.
It's a lot of documents. You're gonna be sending back and forth. But it's
right.
Fortunately, it's easier to send documents.
Correct. Which is really that. Ideally, you've done a lot of this work before we've started looking at a home. If for some reason this was a quick search and within a week of meeting we started looking at homes because of your situation as the buyer, it's going to be very, very important that you're working with your loan officer diligently to get.
Now, what if I am working with my loan officer and then it just doesn't work out?
Sure. Yeah, the numbers come back. They say you actually can't afford it. We were wrong.
Have I lost the house?
You wouldn't want to buy the house at that point. If being honest, because you can't afford it.
Well, no, but let's say there was just something I needed to, as a buyer, I needed to give to the lender, and I just couldn't give it to him. What happens then?
Sure. Depends on what the seller wants to do at that point. Because if we've missed a date of something,
you could find another. I'm trying to get to the point. Trying to lead you to. Let's find a new lender.
Sure. Yeah, we do have the option to switch lenders.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah, because and so it's not the end of the contract
as long as the seller agrees, because it's likely going to require an extension.
Sometimes
if we've worked long enough with the lender, everything's about our contract dates, which we'd have gone through.
Yeah, it could require another amend,
right,
to move closing or to move a couple dates.
So that's even kind of a loaded question. That's why it's so important.
It is very loaded.
Work with a lender that you trust and that you know that's going to.
That's why you want to get with a lender early. That's why when I said get to a lender a year ahead of time, I'm serious.
All the better.
Yeah, you want to go into this so you don't have to worry about all these little details. You can just be like, okay, ready to buy a house. When underwriting's already. And you could actually have underwriting done. Certain lending companies, you can have underwriting done before you even put an offer.
There's a pre-qualification and there's pre-approval.
Right.
And a pre-qualification, essentially, they're saying we will give you this money as long as you can prove that
the house
can
is worth
pay
it.
for it and that the house is worth it.
Yeah.
And so that's where underwriting.
That's the strongest
the appraisal
position
will come in.
besides cash.
Besides cash.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then beyond that, though, is the pre-approval, which is stronger than the pre-qualification.
Yeah.
The pre-approval is saying we've vetted you, we've checked, and you do have the money. Have
that's
the correct debt income ratio.
strongest.
That's the strongest position to be in.
Yeah.
Most buyers are pre-qualified.
Yeah. And you in most offers you need to send a pre-qualification letter with.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So now we're all the way up to close, really.
Really. So part of the other things that we've given, we give all of our buyers their own checklist of things that they're going to need to be working on through this process so that they can work with us. We remind them. We have the conversation up front. We give a checklist. We remind and talk about all these things that are be expected. But it's one of the realities people don't think about, and the excitement of it is like, you're going to have to move.
Yeah.
Like,
should I move on closing day?
Yeah, no. If at all possible, please do not move on closing day. Although I have done a move out and a move in on closing day with a client.
That sounds like fun.
That's a story.
Okay.
It was not the plan. That was not the communicated expectation.
Why is that? Why do we not want to move in and then move out on closing day?
The amount of things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And again, when we agree to purchase a home for said terms by said date, that's the agreement. And if we have to change that, we risk losing the home. Because at any point we have to fire off an amendment to change a date, to move closing, to get more time to move out. Anytime we miss our date, the seller has the opportunity to say, no thanks. Yep. We're going to keep our earnest money that you paid us because you said you were going to do everything you could do to buy this home. And we're going to send you back out in the market and we're going to put our home back up and see if we can find a buyer. And so that's a huge part of our job, is making sure we do not miss these dates. If we can foresee that we're going to miss them, that we get all this worked out ahead of time. Yep. But to risk the home not being clean or being ready for the moving truck of the buyer to move in on the day that they're coming, like there's all these things that could hold up closing. Yeah. And so does it happen? Yes. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. If there's any way possible, move everything into a shipping container,
get it out.
Stay with a family member, rent a hotel room, whatever it is, so that home is ready for the buyer the day that we close.
And then the buyer takes it.
Yep. And then the buyer moves in.
And moves in. I would not schedule a move in until the next day, because close could be 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon.
Yep.
And movers, you don't want to schedule moving for the day of the close.
No. So for our buyers, if you're renting, which a first-time home buyer, they're renting. We've had conversations early on about when's the termination of your lease, what does it cost if you needed a buyout of your lease. We've had all these expectations and conversations. It depends on their financial situation. I love an overlap for renters.
Yeah, a little bit of an overlap.
A week.
Yep, a week. That's good.
If
maybe more.
Right, maybe more. But if September 1st, is your move out date and we can purchase a home a week before and close, that's a solid day, because now you've got a week to move out of this home, and you're not going to have, again, this will be part of the lender conversation, I'm sure, but you'll have at least a month's grace period before you start making your first mortgage payment.
At least a month, yeah.
At least. And sometimes that turns into 2 or a little more, 2 and some change. But yeah, so you have roughly 2 months where you're not paying your mortgage based on all of your closing costs and all those things that worked out. And so, strongly recommend closing days for closing. Create a moving day before and after closing. Yeah. So that we
not a week later, but like you have a week in your apartment. Yeah. But like have schedule, if you're going to have movers come in, you'd have them at the earliest the day after closing.
Right.
And that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah. And as you get closer, you might have to move things around.
Absolutely.
Because things can get messy.
It kind of falls in that range. Like, well, I don't, it's going to cost me an extra $400 to have the moving truck for an extra day. $400 today versus $4,000 tomorrow.
This is a $500,000 purchase.
Exactly. That's a big deal.
This is going to be a problem. So we possibly could move closing up. Possibly.
Which is why we go back to that 2%. Yeah. Is a great number. I'm excited for my buyers if they've got roughly 2%. We have conversations in that realm of gifts and other things. There's a certain percentage that you can receive from a family member if they need to bail you out at the last moment. That's not my ambition. That's not my goal to get us into that kind of situation.
Going strong. You're going to have it'll be a lot. not easier of a process, but it'll
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We want to reduce the heartburn.
So what is closing? Let's talk a little bit about closing. So let's walk right up to the edge of closing. So like 24 hours before. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So after all of our negotiating, all of our amendments, anything that we've seen has been closed, submitted, and everything's been approved, I'll get this wonderful message from our lender that says we're clear to close.
Yeah.
That means underwriting's reviewed, your debt to income, everything is finalized. You're approved to buy the home. The seller's given all their information to be able to sell the home. Title is clean and clear, meaning there's no lien on the home. There's no third party trying to come in and claim ownership to the home that's not a part of the transaction. That's the best text that we can get.
Yep.
Because I get that email, I get that text message or call from our lender. That means we are ready.
Yeah.
And we can take a deep sigh of relief.
Not all the way there.
Not all the way, but our first genuine deep sigh of relief since the appraisal came in. And so that's typically, I would say, at minimum a week before close is usually when we get that. There are some circumstances where things might push a little later, and I've seen clear to close come as few as maybe 3 or even 2 days.
Yeah, 3
before
days.
And so it can get a little tight, but again, my job is to make sure that we get that as soon as possible so that we know exactly what we're heading into, ideally in 4 or 5 days to a week advance of close. But we get that clear to close. We're good to go. The buyer knows how much money we're bringing in a check to the table. The seller knows how much money they're going to need to bring. All the bank account information is in, and then we're going to go close on the home. That's why we call it closing. We're going to close up the contract. We're going to finalize it, and we're going to release all parties from their obligations henceforth. We're going to go to the title company because they're the ones, again, that have been negotiating this. There are remote closings. There are in-office closings. There's all kinds of things on average.
What we do is
we encourage our buyers to be able to go to the closing office with us, to the title company. We're going to go sit at a desk with our loan officer, with the agent, and you and whoever else is involved in the transaction as the buyer. And we're going to sign like 100 different papers.
Make sure we have our ID.
You need your ID
with the name that's on the contract.
You need the title with clear to close. Again, the big celebratory thing that we get. There's going to be an exact to the cent number.
Yep.
And you're going to want to come prepared with that exact to the check.
Well, that money really needs to be there already.
And so, the ideal is you wire that money.
Yeah. No, that's required. It has to be good funds, which good funds is just a contractual term, which means it's going to have to be wired or it's presented as a cashier check into the escrow account prior to.
And they're going to make you jump through 100 hoops because
we're not going to be clear to close.
Fraud, fraud is such a big issue right now, and so we're thankful. Don't gripe about it. It's a really good thing because it keeps your $500,000 from nowhere.
Right. Yeah.
It keeps your $34,000 or whatever you had to pay into this home from being stolen from you before we ever get into the home.
Yeah. So we're going to have to talk to title about how to wire exactly. We're going to take those instructions from their hands. We're not going to take it. Email.
Yeah, I'm not even allowed as the agent to really be involved in that process at all. All that I can do is connect you to title and potentially send you the wiring instructions, but that will need to be confirmed and double checked by title.
I would highly recommend, just to the nature of the way things are, going to title, physically getting the wire instructions from them.
Right.
And that's really the only way I do it.
Yep. And then they'll communicate directly with your bank. You'll get all that set up. Your bank will wire that money to them. What you said is exactly right. The ideal is before we walk into the room, everyone's already put all their money in the pot.
Yep.
And at the end, when all the documents are signed and everything is verified,
title chops it up.
Title will write all those checks and send those out or wire those out wherever they're supposed to go. And so, again, I recommend wire. You hate to walk away with a piece of paper that you might lose in the next, process of moving. I'm exaggerating. Obviously, you could get that taken care of, but the best thing I can recommend for them is you give them the bank account, you walk out of that space, they hit that wire transaction, and within, depending if it's a weekend or a weird holiday or something, typically 24, 48 hours, you've got all that money sitting in your bank account, whatever you were due.
All right, so we closed on the house, we got the keys. Now we need to, all of a sudden we have to do all these phone calls. What are we, putting all the utilities over.
Right. So that's part of our checklist that we're giving them of as you're moving, you're wanting to make sure that you transfer utilities if they're transferable, unless you're moving to some different municipal, type situation. I've walked people through the move from like living in an apartment in the city to having to do propane and well,
right.
And then, so there's a lot of those adjustments that we're making, again, third party, not really part of the contract. The well, sometimes we won't get into that today. That'll be a different,
that's different.
not a different buyer purchase altogether.
Well and septic.
Yeah, whole nother conversation.
But as far as so now the buyer's not just done.
Nope, I mean, Wi-Fi. Your mailing address. You're getting all those things forwarded and changed. Your update. I mean, there's so many of those little things that we forget because we've been in a place for a while. That when we move, we're going to have updated and changed. And so that's the beauty of working with an agent who has all these documents ready to go and can share this information with you and then hold you accountable to it as we go to make sure that, hey, you did call them, right? Like you got utilities turned on, because the seller, as a seller agent, I'm making sure, like, don't shut that thing off until the day that we close, but you're allowed to turn it off. Like, turn it off the day that we close. If we close on the 31st, the seller stops paying for utilities.
Yeah, the buyer owns closing day, so they're responsible.
Right. The minute you sign that last document and they slide a key across the table, that house is yours. You're responsible for the pipes, the roof, the flooding, anything that could happen in that place.
Okay, so we have talked a lot about this whole process. Now, I think we've covered everything up to close.
Yeah,
and then owning a home. That's a whole nother conversation. So
sure.
We've gotten from what is the buyer agency to closing on the deal, and we've gotten a really overall high 30,000 kind of foot view of that whole whole process.
Yeah.
So anything else you really want a first time home buyer to know?
Yeah, I trust matters.
Yeah,
I feel like that's an overarching statement and maybe could take for granted. We are not in a overly trusted industry, and probably for good reason, because it's an easy bar for people to get into.
Yeah, it's
a very high bar for people to be excellent at, to actually be informed and knowledgeable about the process of the transaction. And so in this whole process, you don't have to choose us. We'd love that. we consider ourselves to be very qualified agents, but you need to choose an agent that you can trust, that knows what they're talking about, that is going to have your back, that is going to be transparent through every stage. They're not just going to cover themselves and lie if they make a mistake.
They're going to answer their phone.
Just try to push please answer your phone. Yeah. They're going to be there when you need them to be there. They're going to work late when you need them to work late. Like, they're going to make sure that they take care of you. If you can't trust your agent, it's going to make this whole process very, very difficult, because that's the one person that you should know has your back and is fighting for you. And so, in this whole process, interview your agents, have conversations. I'm sure your cousin is a great agent. They may be, they may not be. Interview them the same way you would interview someone else. If you wouldn't just hand your cousin $500,000, don't hire them as your real estate agent either. And so you really need to have a trust of somebody as your financial,
We'll have a conversation in the future about how to pick an agent.
Cool.
So
good.
Let's, so so the way they can get a hold of either one of us. So my name is Matt Mills. This is
Brandon Stokes.
And we're going to have our contact information in the notes below. So any other questions about this conversation or any future possible topics you'd like us to discuss about real estate in Colorado Springs, let us know. All right. That's it. Awesome.